Hello, Garland Nixon here, and here to talk with all my dear friends in the chat who we found out we're all just a bunch of low lives who don't deserve to live, but for some reason, we're still here. Let's talk. Hello, Garland here. Let me see. I got to make sure I'm having issues here. Rockfin's acting a little funny. Let's see what happens. One of the reasons that I do that, okay, maybe, no, it appears to be running. I don't know what the hell's going on. But at any rate, we're going to talk. I'll just make sure Rockfin's running. Yep, looks like it's still going. All right, forget it. Forget it. Forget it. Let's get going. I know you guys don't want to hear me yapping about my technical difficulties. At any rate, let's go. So, what are we? Oh, man, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. I don't have YouTube properly turned on. Just one of those days, gang. Just one of those days, but that's okay because we have all found out that the Democratic Party people don't like us. That's right. So let me start here. Joy Reid had a guest on, and we found out this. You're going to love this. That we do no longer have any justification for hanging out with our relatives or anything like that. That we are not to be beloved people. Let's check it out.
Right? If you are an LGBTQ person and you know someone in your family voted essentially against your rights, or you're a woman knowing that, this man was calling people the B word, JD Vance was literally calling Kamala Harris the trash and said, we're going to take out the trash. I know a lot of Black women were incredibly triggered by that. And if you then meet somebody and they voted for the people who called you trash, or if you're Puerto Rican, and someone voted that way, do you recommend, just from a psychological standpoint, being around them? We got the holidays coming up.
So I love that you asked this question because, there is a push, I think just a societal norm that if somebody is your family, that they are entitled to your time. And I think the answer is absolutely not. So if you are going into a situation where you have family members, where you have close friends who have voted in ways that are against you, like what you said, against your livelihood, and it's completely fine to not be around those people and to tell them why, to say, I have a problem with the way that you voted because it went against my very livelihood and I'm not going to be around you this holiday. I need to take some space for me. And I actually talk to, adults as well as advising parents for children. I mean, I think, I don't think that you should force children. I don't think you should force adults to be around people just because they're your family. I think there's a level of, need to establish boundaries. And if you feel.
All righty, let me see if I can stop that. I think we've heard enough. And people wonder why for years I've used the term brainwashed cults. And don't get me wrong, I've used that when it comes to both major U.S. parties. And the reason is that I see them as cults, but the Democrats now have just they've gone, full Branch Davidians here. They've gone. I mean, they are. You remember those people that wore like a purple robe and Nikes, and they all took poison because a meteor or a comet was coming, and they thought that Halley's Comet, whatever the hell, and they thought they were going to get a free ride, that a spaceship was coming to pick them up. Yeah, that's what we're looking at now. We're looking at we're looking at Nikes and orange robe land. That's where the Democrats are. They're in Nikes and orange robe land. So what this woman's saying now, keep in mind something. She's into child psychiatry, right? This is supposed to be, these are supposed to be the intellectual class, right? And I think what we're finding out is there's a difference between being an academic and being an intellectual. I've always said this, I consider myself an intellectual, not because my brain has so much more computing power than anyone else. No, it's because of the way I arrive at my conclusions. An intellectual is the way you arrive. To me, one of the ways that I arrive at my conclusions is read a hell of a lot of books. So I know some things I have a foundation to start with, right? But there are other things that you have to add. And that has, to me, there has to be a moral component of your processing and deduction, you know what I mean, and logical capabilities, right? You can't just say, for instance, what is one of the gripes of AI? That there's no moral contingent. There was a particular experiment that was done, at least I read about it, I assumed that it was done in a reliable journal. And basically they had an AI, right, artificial intelligence program, and its job was to land the planes, to get the planes down, and it would get X amount of points for every plane that it landed, and it was all a simulation. So eventually the AI realized that if it crashed a plane, it could get all the points. So all it did was it just crashed every plane and killed everybody aboard. Why? Because there was not a moral contingent, right? A moral proponent of its reasoning, if we'll use that term loosely, processes. It was, how do I get the most points? Oh, okay, if I crash the plane and kill everybody, I get the most points. So that's good enough, right? There was no right and wrong, good and bad humanity about it. It was simply, how do I get the most points, which is logical, which is a concern that we better have about Skynet, okay? But my point being this, but when it comes to politics, it's supposed to, you're supposed to, and I would argue this, the foundation of your political inclinations, in my opinion, should be based on some kind of a moral foundation, right? I want things to be better off for the people in my country, right? Of the world, right? But okay, I'm a member of this country. Let's say I can vote or I can do other things. You can argue about whether or not they help or don't help. But foundationally, I should say things like, well, you know, I want people to have good jobs. I want people to be healthy, maybe health insurance or something, have a roof over their head. I don't like homelessness. Oh, wait a minute. You know, I see a person homeless and they're wandering around talking to themselves. They're obviously mentally ill. And I say, you know, I live in society. And if we have people who are mentally ill who can't take care of themselves because they're not mentally competent, our society is rich enough. We should make sure people like that have a roof over their head and be taken care of. We can afford that. And again, what am I talking about? It's a moral component of your ideology, right? Okay. But what has happened to me in the Democratic Party is that it's become a cult that lacks a moral component. Now, so what happens is this: we should get what we want the way we want it. We're the good people. We are the moral people. Rather than a moral component of their ideology, it's something bad, something really, really evil. And that becomes this: we are the moral component of this entire society. We are the morality of this society. We represent the morality of this society. Therefore, anything we do is by its nature moral, because it's in the best interest of everyone if we are in power. That's kind of like the definition of a totalitarian rule, right? The person in charge, dictatorial rule. The person in charge says, everybody will be better off if I'm in charge. Therefore, I should be in charge. And whatever I have to do to stay in charge, it's for the good of all. So it should happen, right? And so now what you've got is this: they're not in charge and they don't know how to deal with it anymore. They've lost. What happened here? What happened? The Democratic Party made their argument to America in a way they didn't really. They just existed and made up a narrative in which they were going to be in power. But okay, this is what we should do. I put it like this. Let me say this. There was a contradiction that we saw, and that they're dealing with their contradiction, right? This brainwashed cult is dealing with a contradiction. The contradiction is, we're moral. We believe in goodness and righteousness and democracy, right? However, that is contradicted by their actions. We believe in morality. We are morality. We are the good moral people, right? Okay, fine, fair enough. That sounds good to me. Now, you've probably heard this old saying, I can't, I can't hear what you say because what you are is, no, it's like this. What you are is screaming so loud, I can't hear what you say, right? Okay. People like me, I look at the details. You're the party of morality. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let me look at your foreign policy. You're literally sending money to people that are goose stepping around with like Hitler tattoos all over them. You literally started a war on Russia's border. You overthrew the country of Ukraine. And then you lied to the American people that said you didn't overthrow it, that it was an organic change of government. And that was all lies. And you started this lie. And you've got documents that says we want to take over Russia. We want to steal their resources. We want to control Russia. We're going to do all this to Russia and be in charge of Russia. And then you tell the American people it's about democracy and it's about big countries invading little countries. So you tell me you're moral. But when I look at your foreign policy is immoral because it's causing massive debts. And B, why, if it's so moral, why do you have to lie to the American people about what you're doing? Don't even get me started on Gaza. Same thing. You're moral, you're good, you're righteous, and you're blowing children to smithereens. You're killing men, women, and children with reckless disregard for human life. So when I look at your actions and I juxtapose them with your rhetoric, something don't match. Which is it? It obviously isn't that you're the moral creature. So what happens? We have a election, and the Democrats did what they did everywhere else. This was their foreign policy. Their election was the same as their foreign policy, right? They simply lie to Americans. Hey, Putin invaded Ukraine because he woke up on the wrong side of the day and he doesn't like democracy on his border. And he wants to expand, take over Europe, expand the Russian. I mean, just made up a bunch of stuff one after the other. This is why he's doing it. But that wasn't true. Absolutely not true. You just made up a lie. When the election started, you just made up lie after lie to the American people. Your foreign policy is no different than your domestic policy. You make up a narrative and you try to enforce the narrative. Well, we believe in democracy. Really? But when I look at your actions, you've basically usurped democracy the last 2016, 2020, 2024, all three times. You may believe in democracy, but you sure as hell don't practice it, right? So the Democratic Party's got that issue there. We're for democracy, right? Oh, we're for goodness and treating everybody fair and all that kind of stuff. And people are like, you're committing genocide, you're at war all over the place, and you lie like hell to us. And then American people said, well, what are you going to do about the economy? The economy's great. And we're like, well, actually, eggs used to be 99 cents, now they're $5.99. That ain't great. Yes, it is. The economy's great. And what did they tell us? You're not smart enough, American people, to understand that. We got academics like this lady. We got academics to tell us what's true and false, what's good and bad, what's right and wrong. And these academics / intellectuals, unlike you and I, common hoi polloi, unwashed people who we, heaven forbid, we do research and we use facts and data to substantiate our assertions. They just say, this is the way it is. I've heard this term, and I think it's important to understand. The term that I've heard used by some of the neoliberals, consensus. We've got a consensus, right? Okay. Think of the two words C-O-N, like concentration, and census. What is a census? Like taking getting information from a group of people and seeing what the crowd all comes together and says, right? So a consensus to the neoliberal mentality is this: we get a bunch of people that we think are smart, or we respect intellectually. We get them to come up with something, and then we all support that. Well, what happens when your consensus is based on bull crap? What happens if you get a bunch of people who are paid off? For instance, you get a bunch of scientists who are paid off by Big Pharma to tell you that GMO corn is healthy. You get a bunch of people that tell you you should take this medicine, you shouldn't take this medicine's horse paste, this medicine will save you. Get a consensus. And what happens is people like me and people like us, we say, we understand you have a consensus. Fair enough. Reasonable enough. You got a bunch of smart people that you believe are smart, intellectuals, academics. They've all come together and they've told you that we should all do this or not do this. Can we see the documentation? Fair enough. We are good. So, okay, fine. You say we should all do this or we shouldn't do this. There are people like me and the people in the chat who simply say, look, We understand you got a consensus amongst the smarties, right? And you've all decided that everybody should or shouldn't do this, that this is the way things are. And we ain't here to say you're wrong, but we would like to review it for ourselves. And that's what pisses them off. Because in their world, in that world that they live in, the Joy Reids and whoever this person is, you don't question your betters. See, that's the unspoken thing here. You don't question your betters. You don't question the elites. I've heard people say, yes, I watch MSNBC and CNN. I get the truth. You don't have to question it. It's the truth. Why would anybody question the truth, right? So the mentality is we got the truth because we say it's the truth and nobody else has the truth. And around the world, foreign policy, when I say, well, what about Ukraine's history? What about the Maidan coup of 2014? What about the Rose Revolution of 2005, 6? What about that, my friend, is fake news. That's online misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, all of the above. And so basically what they say is this: once we have this consensus amongst the ruling elite, which we say it comes from the academics, but it comes from the ruling elite, any attempt to question it is misinfo, malinfo, disinfo, whatever the term you use before information, dismiss or malinformation, because you are questioning the consensus that have been reached by your betters. We don't accept betters. We don't accept lessers. We don't accept betters. In fact, what we do is we have a respect for the common man, for the ordinary person and woman. And we say, well, you know what? We can all read. So if you tell us we got to do this or think this or believe this, we'll read and we're willing to make a decision for ourselves. So what you have is a clash between a bunch of elitists who believe that the ruling class comes up with a narrative and everybody else follows it, and people like us who say the ordinary man and woman has a right. If you're going to ask them to make a decision for their life, they have a right to research themselves and figure it out. So what happened? They gave us a line of crap for the last 4 years. And in the end, when America says we're hurting, they said what? No, you're not. The economy's great. America said, oh, yeah, we are. What is it? 50% of the Americans can't come up with $400 for an emergency. That ain't good. 70-some% are living paycheck to paycheck. That's not a good economy. But to the elite, it is. It is. It's a great economy. And if you push back against the consensus of the elite, there's something wrong with you, buddy, and you need to be dealt with, deplatform, whatever. Before I get into some of the stuff that we're talking about here, let me say this. There's a professor you might have heard of. A lot of people are talking about him by the name of Alan Lichtman, Professor Alan Lichtman. Alan Lichtman is a guy, man from, and it's a perfect example, from American University, lives over in Bethesda. His wife's Karen. I know them both. He has this book. It was previously called The 13 Keys to the White House. That's what it was originally called. And there was 13 things and issues, whatever you want to call them, standards. And if in fact, whichever party, the incumbent party or the challenger party, whichever got 7 of the 13 would win. And so he did that, and he predicted that Kamala would win, right? And he missed it. As soon as he predicted it, I knew he was wrong, and he missed it. Let me say this first about Professor Alan Lichtman. I haven't seen him in some years, but I knew him. I met him. He's a very nice person. I thought the world of him. He's, yes, he got it wrong. And yes, he probably has Trump derangement syndrome. But I met him and his wife. She does a lot of work on environmental stuff. And I will tell you, Professor Lichtman is I've been to his office at American University and met with him there. And I will say this, he's a really nice person. And he is brilliant. He's a historian, a brilliant man, right? So here's my point. It's not like we're talking about some blithering asshole. It's not like we're talking about some moron. No, we're talking about a very nice person, kind person who I think, let's not mistake him into being some jerk. If you get to know him, you'll find out he's a brilliant person. I have a lot of respect for his knowledge of historian and his intellectual capabilities and all of those things. But yet he got it wrong. Now, for one thing, we can learn something from that. The same thing as we can learn from the woman that we were watching at the beginning. And that is, just because you got a bunch of acronyms in front of your name or behind your name, just because you got PhDs, you've written books. He's written books. I read several of them. One of them was called FDR and the Jews. He gave me a copy of that, and he gave me copies himself. Another one was called like White Christian America or something. He wrote another book about, thick book. He writes these books this thick about how the Republican Party got aligned with evangelical Christians. Interesting book, right? Good book. But I mean, he's a smart guy. It's far. You read his historian stuff. It's packed and chock full of details, right? So you ask yourself, how can he get it? Not he didn't get this wrong. That would be kind to say that he got it wrong. Wrong ain't what he got it. It was I mean, to me, when I looked at it, as soon as I saw it, I'm like, how could anyone look at Kamala from an intellectual perspective and think she's going to win? How could anybody look at the economy looking for him and think she's going to win? And when you looked at his keys, the first two things I saw, number one, short-term economic outlook. He had blue. That goes to the Democrats. In other words, they get that of the 13 keys. The other one, long-term economic outlook. He had blue. That one goes to the Democrats. Well, if you take both of those and gives them to the Republicans, he had the Democrats winning 8-6, right? If you take those two out, then the Democrats only have 6. You put them with the Republicans, and now the Republicans win 8-6. So if I'd have looked at that, I may have disagreed with everything else, but I could took the economic ones, moved them over in the correct category, and realistically, it would have accurately predicted who was going to win. So had he looked at that perspective through the lens of the working class, instead of saying, yes, the short-term economy and long-term economy is good, if he looked at it through the lens of the working class and said, oh, they're crap, then he'd have got it right. The question is, why didn't he? And here's what I have to say. There's a reason I've been like calling these parties a brainwash cult. And in particular, the Democrats seem to have jumped the shark when it comes to the brainwash cult factor, right? Because now there are a number of things that they have to believe, or their party doesn't exist, or their ideology doesn't exist. That's called cult-like, right? There are things they can't take into account. They can't, when the Democratic Party, when the Biden team released factors, when they released economic reports that said, okay, the economy's doing good. First of all, if you're living pretty good, if you're a tenured professor and you're doing, you live in a nice place and you're living well and you can afford, let's face it, if you're making a lot of money, how much do you really notice the groceries go up? It doesn't really bother you because you still, you're okay. You're going to be fine. You don't really pay that much attention to the cost of the prices anyway, because it's not that big a deal to you. You're not hurting, right? So you don't see it, hear it, or feel it. And so, unfortunately, you think the economy is great when the Biden administration tells you they're great, and you put that down as a couple of the keys, and you get it wrong. Now, when they ask him, he revolted. He resorted to more of the cult-like thinking. Well, here's what he says: I couldn't take into account racism and sexism and blah blah blah. Right? In other words, he goes back to the Democratic Party. It wasn't the traditional issues that people vote on this time. James Carville, if the economy's stupid, he's the one who coined that phrase. Traditionally, people vote on the same thing, and whether or not they can eat is a big one. Whether or not they can put a roof over their head is a big one, right? And we would think that everybody would start there. That's why it was so easy for me to predict the outcome, because I started with people can't pay their bills, the rent's too damn high, everything's too high. Sorry, incumbent party, you are going to lose. That's where I started. But if I was a member of the hoi polloi, I wouldn't have known that, would I? Everything's fine. And so therefore, what we have now is a party that is, I put it like this. I've heard people who are struggling or on fixed incomes, not impoverished, but they got a retirement or they got a, and or Social Security. So they're on a fixed income. They ain't setting the world on fire, but they ain't starving. You know what I mean? But they're, things are tight. They're making it. And I've heard some of those, yes, the economy's doing great. It's good. And I'm like, but I've just heard you complain about the prices. And now, in the context of their regular day-to-day life, if you ask them how's things going, they'll say the prices are too high. But then when you say, what about voting? Oh, the economy's great. It's like a separation. It's like when I talk about politics, there's a narrative. And the narrative is everything that Democrats do is good, everything that Republicans do is bad. And in that narrative, I've got to go along with whatever the cult says. The cult says something, and this is our positions. Let's talk about what the woman said. She said, if you've got friends and members, family, who basically, let's put it down for it, voted for Trump. And what did she say? If they voted in a way that's going to hurt my ability to make a living, how are they going to hurt your ability to make a living, lady? You're at like Yale or Harvard or some stinking where. You're going to get paid. You're probably a tenured professor. You're a professor, at least you're at one of the big vine-covered universities, making a nice salary. You got everything going right for you. You're on MSNBC running your stinking yap. And what happens? If you hurt my way of making a living because you voted the wrong way, then you don't have a right to my presence. And I'm thinking, if I got a family event and I'm cooking turkey and yams or whatever the hell, I don't eat meat. Let's just say salmon. I usually have salmon, right? I eat seafood. And you're like, and I'm like, hey, cousin, fill in the blank. Wouldn't you like to come over? We're going to have lots of great food and carrot cake. I know you love carrot cake. Got a good carrot cake. And she says, well, Garland, did you vote for Kamala Harris? And I'll be like, well, no, I mean, I don't, I'm a third party guy. I never vote for Democrats or Republicans. Then you don't have a right to my presence. I'd be like, ooh, well then, happy holidays. Bye. Boom. Hey, guess what, everybody? One less person to eat, all the more. Hey, pass me that gravy and mashed potatoes, would you, pal? That's what I'm thinking. So what? You ain't coming. Does it hurt me? Does it hurt your family? Now, she went on to say your children. So now these brainwashed cult members are going to be telling their children, they're going to be saying to their kids, hey, don't go hang out with your family over the holidays. For God's sake, I'm losing it. I need some help. Let's go to Dr. Jim Kavanaugh. Dr. Jim, I'm talking now about, and the way I put it is this: the collapse of a brainwashed cult, the party of wokeism and war hates the American voters, and in particular, that video on Joy Reid. I don't know if you saw it. I showed it to everybody, where there's this woman, and she's a psychiatrist from Yale or whatever, and she's talking to Joy Reid, and she starts telling people, if your family members during the holidays are getting together, and if they voted the wrong way, they don't have a right to your presence and your kids. Dude, that sounds like a cult to me. Yeah, and in fact, it sounds exactly like a cult, right? We have to separate from them. They don't think right. They're immoral, and we're the only ones who have morality. And I'm like, but you guys are like sending weapons to Nazis and like hugging genocidal killers. Mm-hmm. But we don't have a right to, because our family members didn't vote the right way. So we have to from them. Dr. Jim Kavanaugh. How bad? What makes some sense of this for me? I can't.
Yeah, I did see a woman on Twitter or TikTok who recorded herself in absolute tears and completely breaking down. Oh, my father, will I ever be able to? I love my father, but I don't know if I'll ever be able to talk to him again. Or blah, blah. I mean, again, look, this is silly. This is cultish behavior, and nobody's hands are clean here. Anybody who voted for Donald Trump or Kamala Harris, genocide wasn't a deal breaker for them.
Right.
If you made a tactical decision to vote for Kamala Harris despite the genocide, and someone else made a tactical decision to vote for Donald Trump despite the genocide, then you're not in any position to be pretending that you're in some kind of sacred space morally or virtuously, some kind of virtuous space that can exclude other people from your life. It's really kind of insulting and silly, but insulting and dangerous. But this happened in the United States. Look, it happened with COVID, and it happened with people in my extended family screaming at people not taking a vaccine. What are you talking about? People are making their own choices about this. This was a political choice, and it's a bad political choice The choice between those two political candidates was a bad choice. There was no good choice there. And anybody who's saying there is, I'm sorry, being a fool and being cultish. Both of them were at the very least committed to complete unconditional support of a genocidal apartheid regime and its existence and its continuation and giving every weapon that was necessary and that regime wanted to slaughter and kill as many people and as many children as it wanted anywhere it wanted. The plurality of people that it killed were between the ages of 5 and 9. 70% were women and children. So anybody who wants to get on a high horse about voting for Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump or vice versa, can kiss my butt because that's, they really have nobody's in a position to do that as far as I'm concerned.
And, I've even done this because I'm with you. And I've said to people, well, you know what? I couldn't vote for Kamala Harris because of, like I said, I started naming all of the things. We'd be here all day if I named all the things that Biden did. I could go on and on. Like sending nuclear submarines to South Korea for the first time ever. You know what I mean? Nuclear brinksmanship, right? Surrounding, we've got to go to war with China. We'll be in war with China by 2027. Israel. I mean, I could go from one thing to the next and I could find 100 reasons why there's no way in hell I could vote for these monsters. But I'm not going to go to Thanksgiving dinner and voir dire the family, right? Okay, everybody, I'm going to pass around the document. I want you to fill out, did you vote for Trump or Harris? Did you vote for this person? Blah, blah, blah. I'm sorry, you, sir, get no yams. You voted for It's this cultish mentality. And it is based on this weird, and see, that's why, again, it's cultish. It's this concept that my group is moral, right? My group is extremely moral. We are good, and everyone else is evil, right? Think about this. If you vote for Trump, certainly you're an evil demon, right? But, and you've heard this, if you stay home and don't vote, that's a vote for Trump. If you vote for Jill Stein, the Libertarian Party, the Communist Party, the party, whatever the hell, right? I've heard people, I didn't know the name of some of these parties with all these names. But if you vote for any of them, that's evil. That's voting for Trump as opposed to Kamala Harris. And I'm like, you people aren't even making sense anymore. The people in all the other parties are like, well, I'm a member of the Libertarian Party. And I look at you and say, that's your party? I wish we had 12 parties and you had to get a coalition, to vote. We could get something done a little better maybe. But these people now are, I put it like this. They don't even seem to have a concept that they were beaten so bad that we can interpret that as a total rejection. Like the American people looked at them and said, there's a lot of things, the whole transgender people reading for little kids. And I mean, people, I've heard this in the Black community. I'm not happy with that. Which people, it's going to happen. The whole, we've got to have the strongest military in the world and blah, blah, blah. There's people who are going to look at that and say, no, that's not for me. There's not even an acceptance that somebody could look at the Democratic Party and say that one thing right there, I won't go with. I'll go with somebody. No, your family members, your mother, your sister must be rejected, Jim. If you have kids, reject them if they didn't vote for Kamala.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, look. Yeah, as you say, there were all kinds of things that were deal breakers for Democrats 10 years ago. Dick Cheney. I mean, he was the devil. It was unimaginable that a Democrat would ally with Dick Cheney and make a pitch, go around making a last-minute election campaign with Liz Cheney on the basis of also telling her how great her father was, in swing states, and not allowing a Palestinian voice to be heard on the podium of the convention, and throwing Muslim people who had been for a decade working for the Democratic Party, throwing them out of their events. So this is, again, there's no distinction between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris that is, as people overestimate what the level of venality of one versus the other is. They're both damn venal, and they both deserve to lose. And I didn't vote for either. I didn't vote for anybody, and I wrote about that. But what I'm saying is, and I'm not going to look down on people who did. You know,
Exactly.
Look, I spend a lot of time in Western Pennsylvania. I know it's all Trump. I know a lot of Trumpers with whom I have day-to-day relationships. They're very nice people. They're very generous people. You know, I think they're wrong, and I oppose them on many issues. But you know, same thing with Democratic voters. I think they're wrong, and I oppose them on many issues. And I don't have anybody I really feel, you know, neither of those positions of the political parties is something that I am by default supporting. I'm not by default a Democrat. Right. I'm a person who's a socialist and a leftist, and the Democratic Party is not only not socialist and leftist, it's the most effective blockade to policies that are socialist and leftist. We would have single payer, universal coverage, health insurance right now if it weren't for the opposition of Barack Obama and the Democratic Party. Nobody could have stopped it. And the Democratic Party since 2008 has been on the mission of blocking that from one of its main missions has been to block single payer universal health care. And it's done that successfully. The Republicans nobody could stop it if a major party like the Democrats argued for it, explained it, had its allied media working for it and arguing for it the way they do for Dick Cheney's daughter. And they don't, because they oppose it. And they oppose every social democratic program that would actually improve the material lives of people. And that's why we don't have them. The Republicans have opposed them too, but we know that. And the Republicans couldn't successfully oppose them without the help of the Democrats. So my position is, I'm not a default Democrat. I'm not a default Republican. I agree with with Democrats on some issues and Republicans on some issues. But I think, you know, it's a terrible situation that either party that the Democrats have had us in and have exacerbated. And it's going to be a terrible situation that the Trump administration is going to exacerbate. I have no illusions about that. They're going to upend the country and destroy it even further. And but you know, this is not something I can feel goody shoes about or virtuous about. It's a terrible thing. I'm in a terrible circumstance. I'm American. I'm responsible for what's happening. You know, my hands aren't clean. The Democrats' hands aren't clean, and the Republicans' hands aren't clean. So I'm not going to play saint and sinner over this.
You know, something I find interesting too, and that is, and these are the people that, to be honest, I got to say this. You know who I despise worst out of this whole bunch? Bernie Sanders in that group. I really do, for this reason. So Bernie Sanders, who 2 weeks ago, remember this? Now, all the things he said about Biden, they shouldn't do this. Oh, they're doing blah, 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 blah. As soon as Biden runs, I'm supporting Biden unconditionally. We got to vote Biden in, right? Then Kamala. Well, and then they're like, well, all these terrible things are going on and what's going on in Gaza, and they won't do blah, blah, and blah, blah, blah. And Bernie's like, yeah. But Trump would be worse. So we got to vote for Kamala Harris. And then, you know, the usual, we can get her in there and pull her, let that foolishness, right? So Bernie goes on and on with all of this. Now, after they lose, Bernie's in the news. I can't believe the Democratic Party. They've got to stand up for the working class. Bernie will never, ever, when it's needed, right? When the policies are going on, when the elections are going on, the AOC's out there now too. I've got tough talk and tough love for the Democratic Party, right? Yeah. So they will support these people embarrassingly, humiliate themselves, prostrate themselves before people who will spit on their corpse, you know. And then all of a sudden, well, I tried to tell the Democratic Party but they wouldn't listen to me and blah, blah, blah. To me, they make me sick. Look, Nancy Pelosi, I know who you are. You're going to buy stocks. You're going to make money. You got a refrigerator full of expensive chocolate ice cream. Life is good. I ain't hating on you. I don't like you, but I know that you're just a neoliberal monster. Fair enough. I can confront that. It's the Bernies and the AOCs of the world who kind of keep the party together in a way. You know, they got to hold on to this block of people who are somehow going to have hope that the Democratic Party will one day wake up and do that. I mean, it's just sickening. This Monday morning quarterbacking of these people who spent so much time pushing these monsters and ghouls and warmongers and liars. And now we're supposed to believe that they're genuinely there. And you know what the party will do? The party will say, you know, we're going to bring Bernie Sanders in and talk to him about how we can revive the party. You know what I mean? I mean, they just use these.
They won't even do that now.
No,
they're
doing
exactly the opposite. They're doing exactly. Look, I want some of Nancy Pelosi's ice cream, but yeah, Bernie 2 weeks before the election said Joe Biden was the most pro-worker candidate ever, and 2 days after the election, he's writing, the Democratic Party has to face up the fact that it's abandoned the working class. Well, it didn't abandon the working class in the last 2 weeks, Bernie. It's abandoned the working class over the last 20, 30 years. And you kept people. That's his job. That's Nance. That's AOC's job.
Yep.
Corral people, the sheepdog people who do want to see progressive policies that will improve the material lives of the working class, to keep them in the Democratic Party and dangle some hope in them that they will move the Democratic Party left. People like us, baloney. And if people don't get that at this point, the Democratic Party is institutionally committed. It's a counter-revolutionary, capitalist, right-wing, reactionary party that's institutionally committed to protecting imperialism, Zionism, and the ruthless rule of capital in the United States and the hegemony of the capitalist class over the working class in the United States. And Bernie Sanders and AOC aren't going to change it. And the proof of the pudding is the pudding. They haven't changed it, and they're not going to change it, and they can't change it. Now, if they think that they can, if they sincerely think that, well, that's their problem then. But other people who, and I think most of the people who were involved in the Bernie campaigns in 2016, 2020 have realized this, and and have gotten over it, and they see what happened. But, this is the idea that Bernie and AOC have, that Bernie certainly has, that the number one priority is keeping the Republicans out of power.
Yep.
That's the number one priority. Everything has to be subordinated to the Democrats. May be bad, but there's some kind of qualitative difference between the Democrats and Republicans that constitutes the Republicans as fascist in some way, or qualitatively more evil than the Democrats. No, they're not. They're both reactionary, capitalist, Zionist, anti-working class parties. One of them does it in claiming to be a party of the working class, which it no longer can claim. The working class doesn't believe that anymore. It's not the party of Roosevelt. It's not even the party of Jimmy Carter, for God's sakes. It's gone. The working class is leaving the party, and for good reason, because the party keeps screwing them over. Look, ask me, ask Bernie Sanders. Chuck Schumer said, every working class voter we lose in Western Pennsylvania, we're going to pick up two moderate Republicans in the Philadelphia suburbs. Guess what? This is what that policy has gotten you. Now they're going to try to appeal to working class voters again. They're going to try to appeal by making promises they will never keep. But the working class has learned. Now, I think it's very difficult and good. The working class has learned we can't believe a damn thing the Democratic Party says. And you can't. They're going to get into power, and they're going to pretend they're too weak. And they can pretend they can't do it because the Republicans won't let them, which is baloney. Barack Obama we did not have single-payer health care because the Republicans opposed it. The Republicans could do nothing about it. They didn't vote. Not one vote for Obamacare. They didn't need a vote. Obama passed what he wanted, which was the Republican Mitt Romney Heritage Foundation Project 225 healthcare plan. So that's what Obama wanted. And Obama played the Democrat progressives. Oh, I really would like to do this. No, he didn't. And behind the scenes, and it's clear, and everybody can, his HA secretary, Catherine Sebela, said, he got exactly what he wanted. So this is what happens again and again. We get wars not because the Republicans forced the Democrats into it. The Democrats wanted it. And so this is a bunch of baloney, and people have to just realize, and it's terrible. I don't know what to tell you about it because there's no path electorally to get a third party in, but that's the situation. The Democrats are an enemy of the working class and an enemy of the progressive movement.
Right. And
the most effective enemy.
Yeah. Let me add this. A bit more about their, because here's what's so telling, I think. Here's what's so telling, you probably heard this. It's not what happens to you in life. It's how you respond to what happens to you in life, right? Okay, they lost, and they didn't just lose. They got obliterated, to use Trump's favorite word, right? They got obliterated, right?
Mhm.
Here's the thing. Their response was anger at the voters.
Yeah.
I literally heard someone say, yes, this, whatever, black women, this, but how they break down these various demographics into like these esoteric categories. Well, black women over the age of such and such that have this kind of education that make less, they break them down into these tiny little categories, right? And they use this word, failed her. And I'm like, did you just say the voters failed the elitist? That's not possible if you understand. I don't care if you call it democracy or a constitutional republic. You call it what you want. There's no political language that you can use that implies that the people at the bottom, who are supposed to, depending upon how you interpret a constitutional republic, any way you interpret it, they are supposed to expect that their needs are addressed, that they are represented by the people that they put in office. In theory, that we don't get that, but that's what you're supposed to have. That's supposed to be the expectation. And when people in a party are saying, in a party, the members of the public have failed the elitist that's running for office, you are now actually saying there's no agency for the voting public and the voters. I don't view them as people who have a right to an opinion. The elitists come up with a consensus, and then they tell us what to do.
Yeah, the presumption is that you people should by default agree with you, and if they don't, then they're doing something wrong. Look, and that I've seen it in a number of different places. Kamala didn't fail us, the country failed Kamala. This is a crazy attitude. But and it's not that I don't disagree that there are problems with the American electorate and the American populace. I mean, people have been badly educated politically. The political education of the country mainly comes through cable TV news and social media, and
dare we say they've been propagandized to the point where they do, right? Dare we say that people have been so propagandized that they're not informed voters? I will agree with you there.
Yeah, and as Christopher Hitchens said in his Better Days, people tend to, we have a country in which we have billionaire populism, billionaires posing as populists, and we have a country in which a lot of the working class has this Shark Tank ideology of I'm just a temporarily, as Steinbeck said, a temporarily embarrassed capitalist, which is usually spoken as temporarily embarrassed millionaire. Right. And people have, what I think are silly and self-defeating notions of how the world works and what can be done. And so, and that's, I'm not romanticizing the American electorate or anything, but they make choices but they share those ideologies with Democratic politicians, but for the most part, and they have those ideologies because Democratic politicians do not really attack them, do not really offer an alternative. So, on the general public cultural stage, there's a set of assumptions about how the world works that are mainly shared. The Americans are the good guys, and capitalism is the greatest thing since sliced bread. And, and if you don't agree with all that, you're racist or sexist or a Putin puppet or something like that. So, and that's the way they do it. So, and a lot of people have just bristled at the idea. Don't get up here and wag your finger at me and tell me if I don't vote for Kamala Harris, I'm a misogynist. What are you talking about? I have other reasons for not voting for Kamala Harris.
You know what? That's important what you just said, Jim. Yeah. And I think that there is a method to their madness, right? I think that's important. I have other reasons. One of the issues I think that the elitists are using now, the poor saps that have been brainwashed are using it too, but they don't understand why. Look, they don't want people to discuss the other reasons. Yeah. You just didn't vote for her because you're a stupid, sexist, misogynist, anti-trans, all of those things, right? And if you say, well, there are other reasons, because now you're going to start talking about the prices, and 50% of the Americans don't have $400 for emergency. All of those things that are a substantive discussion of the economic hardships of American people today, and the consequences of neoliberalism and all these, and well, perhaps our policy, we got regressive tax policies. You could go on and on and on. No, Jim, that would be evil to have those discussions. So when I look at their response, it is attack the voters. You're a bunch of sexist transphobes. That's why you didn't vote for her. Racist. We got a misogynist. Okay, we got to do that, and we have to make sure. I heard this woman on another, again, MSNBC. She's talking about the price. Yeah, you know, people are struggling out there, and this guy, some black guy, a professor from Yale or Harvard or Columbia, wherever the hell, right? Vine covered you, I call it, and he says, "I will not believe that. I can't believe it." And then he goes on to say it's racist. He says, "I cannot believe that." He was angry. And he goes on to say it's racism and sexism and blah, blah, blah. But if we really start talking about economics, then I'll put it like this. It's easy for them to say, here, we've got a list of various economic indicators that we use to show you that the economy is great. But if they talk to the person, the ordinary person on the street, and get their anecdotal data, all of the ordinary people on the street are going to say, this stuff's too high. So don't you think part of this, by the people at the top that are pushing this narrative that it's all about racism and sexism, is in fact a move to avoid a substantive discussion about the struggles of the everyday people?
That's exactly right. They not only are they corralling them into a party, they're corralling them into a discourse, which is fenced around by those things. And they don't want, that's to avoid having discussion. But the fact, it's absolutely disgraceful that people lose their homes for medical bills. It's just disgraceful that people are evicted from their homes for medical bills. This is nuts. This is disgraceful in this country. And it's disgraceful that credit card companies charge 25% interest. That's a very simple thing that could be outlawed tomorrow. It used to be against the law. Outlaw, have public financing, low interest loans for everybody. There's no reason we can't do that, except with the fact that we're ruled by the dictatorship of capital. There are all of these things that hundreds of things that affect people's lives. The fact that BlackRock and Blackstone are buying up residential properties in order to keep rents as high as they can, buying up mobile home parks now to kick people out of the last bastion of affordable housing. This is disgraceful. This is something they don't want to talk about. That's not an issue. They're all racist. It's the same people who voted for Obama, who vote for women all the time, for governors and mayors, etc. Oh, you're misogynist because you won't vote for Kamala Harris, the woman who put a black woman, who arrested a black woman because she brought her daughter with
sickle cell. Her daughter had sickle cell anemia.
Sickle cell. She had to bring her to the hospital 3 times a week and couldn't put her in school. She deliberately went after her and said, I know I'll end up dropping the charges, but I'll ruin their lives in the meantime, which she did. The woman was evicted from her home because of that. So this. I won't vote for that woman because the only reason you won't vote for that woman is because she's a woman. No, I won't vote for her because she did that. And she was proud of it. And she's bullshitting about the fact that, I'm not like that anymore. But the worst thing is that right now, what I was saying to somebody before, they're not sitting back and saying, what we do, what they did wrong. You know what they're saying on MSNBC and CNN? God, Kamala Harris made a mistake because she talked about Medicare for all 4 years ago. She made a mistake because she wasn't tough enough on Israel. Because I saw a woman on CNN or MSNBC saying, my daughter is in college and her Jewish friends are saying, I'm going to vote for Trump because Kamala Harris isn't strong enough in defense of Israel. And she was presenting that as one of the things the Democrats have to confront, that Kamala Harris lost votes because she wasn't strong among Jewish college students, so her daughter's friends, because she wasn't strong enough in supporting Israel. That's ridiculous. She lost every college town in Michigan. She lost Dearborn. She lost in a state where Rashida Tlaib won 70% of the vote. So the polls of independent voters in Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, where all the plurality of them wanted ceasefire and end arms sales to Israel, she's going to lose votes, but that's what they're going to say. They're going to say she went too far to the left. I actually heard people say Joe Biden ran as a moderate, but then he became a leftist when he was in power. What are you talking about? This is the discourse. The problem is the United States. This is the ideological condition of the United States right now is one in which you can't see the left, because what poses as the left is this kind of culture war, identitarian politics that really is totally askew the left.
Let me give you something interesting too. To be frank, just as an example, I always go with different.
But the general point is that's what they're saying now. The Democratic Party has to move right to win.
Oh yeah, because hugging Dick Cheney and Liz Cheney is way far to the left. You got to go way to the right of Liz Cheney before. But even then, if you think about it, I was listening to this guy called, my Friday radio show, and a guy called in and he tells me he's voting for Trump. And he's like, man, things are just too, a black guy. He sounded like a black guy. You never know, I guess, but he sounded like it. And it was this, things are too expensive. That's my reason. Right. And I said, well, I don't think that Trump's going to fix anything. I said, but that's a logical reason to vote for somebody. You know what I mean? I had people call, I'm sick of the wars. And maybe Trump will stop it. Oh, well, maybe he will, maybe whatever. But my point is this.
Yeah.
These are logical reasons for somebody to vote, right? We can, notwithstanding all the questions we can have about neoliberalism and empire and what imperialism does. Yes, those are maybe conversations that those people may not be ready to have. But for the guy that works for county roads, you know what I mean? And the cold, earns a hard living, comes home, and he was paying 99 cents for eggs, and now he's paying $4.99 for eggs. For that guy, when he goes and votes, he's looking and he's saying, well, whoever is in, this happened over this course of 4 years. I don't know about this guy, but I'm going to give it a shot. It is a logical reason to vote. Right.
Yeah, if you want to argue with it. Say, well, you got to look, but you don't say if you do that, you're a bad person.
That's
the point. You want to have a discussion about the issue, but you can't think that way, or else you're a monster. You're an evil person.
And
I can't have anything to do with you if you're like that. Get away from me.
Come to your house.
Yeah, I mean, it's
now when that guy has Thanksgiving turkey and he calls his aunt, hey, Aunt Mary, why don't you come over? The kids would love to see you. No, you voted for Trump.
Yeah, I know. Nobody's in that position in this country of taking that high horse and pretending they're the paragon of virtue relative to people who voted for Trump. It's just not possible. Everybody they had
Obama, man. They had celebrities. So now let me add this. The other part, this is important. One of the things we're discussing here is their so-called postmortem. Now they're having this other conversation. Well, we shouldn't have had these celebrities, right? That's something they're fine with discussing, right? There's certain things within the Overton window that you can discuss. They turn on. This is okay. Whether Joe Biden got out early enough. Well, if he'd have waited a little bit longer, same people. Now we were everything we heard about insiders said Pelosi forced him out, right? But Pelosi's now out there saying, well, he didn't get out early enough. We could have did this. People who stopped a primary, who rigged the primary. They're like Dean Smith, Marianne Williamson, RFK Jr. are running, but they only put Biden's name on the primary ballot, so you couldn't vote for anyone else but him. Now they're saying, well, we should have had another mini primary. And then, well, no, we should have had a primary in the first place, not a mini one after that. You deliberately did that because you knew you were going to have to get rid of him. Oh, we should have come out earlier with his cognitive issues. You deliberately did that because you knew if you ran a primary that maybe RFK Jr. or Dean Smith or Marianne Williamson, one of them was going to come in second. And then
at least
he crapped out.
Yeah, I mean, they knew Joe Biden. They knew Joe Biden's problems. They hid them from the American people. They knew them. They knew them 100%. I knew it in 2020. And we all said it. They've known it, and they hid it because they knew he would lose. Just like they didn't put Kamala even in a so-called after Biden dropped out. Let's have a mini primary because they knew he would lose. But I like the line, which I think is probably true, that people are saying that Biden sandbagged them because
yes, he did.
Because Obama and Pelosi wanted this little mini primary where they put up 3 people that they thought were okay and let people vote on the convention. But Biden, by endorsing Kamala immediately, forced them into supporting her, and because he was pissed off. And I like that idea. I think it's probably true. And he got his comeuppance here. And he said, "This is what you wanted, Barack and Nancy. You got it."
Yeah. And so, but yeah. So what we get to is this: we get to a discussion about non-policy things, right? If we talk about whether or not he got out early enough, if we talk about whether or not we had a mini primary, again, we're not giving the voters the respect that they understand their day-to-day circumstances. Why are we not talking about inflation was hurting you? People were unhappy with foreign policy. They were unhappy with Gaza. They want the Ukraine conflict over. I could go. They're afraid. They got kids. I've heard people say, "Hey, I got a couple sons. I don't want to start a war and send my 2 18-year-old twin boys off to die in a sand somewhere in some godforsaken hellhole." Right. So the thing about it is this: they've locked themselves into such a corner, an ideological corner. They can't. Politically speaking, they cannot have a discussion that is substantive, that is intellectual, that is in depth. It has to be superficial things about tweaking the way they ran they ran the campaigns, as opposed to this is what the American people were dealing with. Notwithstanding whether Trump can do it or not, there was something else out there. And they were going to reach for something else. That's all it was.
They work on ad hominem dismissal. You're a Trumper. You're a Putin puppet. You're a conspiracy theorist. All of these things. They have categories in their mind that are that allow them not to discuss, as you say, not to discuss the substantive issue, but to automatically dismiss the person who brings it up because they're a Trumper, a conspiracy theorist, Putin puppet, whatever the tagline is that has been given to them by the media they absorb and by their friend circle, and therefore but this is why, again, I've said a number of times, the epistemological crisis, it becomes impossible to think things through because you run into that epistemological wall of no, I just dismiss the possibility of thinking about that. I know that's off the table, and I have to try and shut down anybody who brings things like that up. They wanted to get rid of Joe Rogan. Don't forget, they wanted to get rid of all of doctors and scientists. And the COVID was one of the worst things about this. It intensified that epistemological game where you build these walls and you build these resistance tags that prevent you from discussing things and from thinking about things because you rule them off. You rule the people who are saying something like that. There must be something wrong with them. And I know the categories that might be. They're either anti-scientific, anti-vaxxers. They're they're Putin puppets. They're conspiracy theorists, et cetera, Trumpers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I can't really have a discussion of the issue because the issue is really only covering for those things, which is just silly and nonsensical. And this is not the way. Not only to have politics, it's not the way to have a society. It's not the way to have interaction. It's not the way to learn anything or to change anything, any problems that exist to change policies. It's just,
well, how about nuts. This? You brought up Rogan. Here's an example. So now they want to talk about Rogan, right? But not in the correct context. I heard some of them talking on one of these shows, and they said, "Yes, Trump. We don't go Joe Rogan. Whose idea was it in the in their and he spoke to men, as if what he said to men didn't matter. It was just that he spoke to men, and all these men watch it. And she should have went on because all of male votes she could have got, implying that if she'd have just went on Joe Rogan." Because men watch Joe Rogan, she'd have got the same outcome as Trump. She'd have got the same voters. Again, this epistemological crisis. What would make you say that she'd be as effective on Joe Rogan as Trump was? You see what I'm saying? What they left out. She should have went on Joe Rogan. Whose idea was it? Well, you left something out. Joe Rogan said, "Come on."
Yeah.
And they said, "Yeah, but we can only do an hour, half hour, 20 minutes, 40 minutes, whatever," right? They said, "We do a limited amount of time." Joe Rogan said it. He said, I told him I got a 3-hour show.
Yeah.
Trump came on for 3 hours.
Yeah.
If you want to come on, and I heard him say, look, I'm not going to tear into him. I'll be nice. And there were people that said he was too nice to Trump, right? He gave him too many softballs. I understand. Look, as long as he was fair and he was willing to treat both people the same way, great, fine, whatever. I ain't got a problem with that. It's his damn show, right?
Yeah.
So he was obviously willing to bring her on and ask her some questions, and they didn't do it. But why? Because she's a flipping idiot. Because she has the IQ of this stone right here.
Yeah.
Okay. And they knew good and damn well that if they put her on air, she was going to make a fool of herself, that she was going to intellectually collapse. And Trump even said it. During the Joe Rogan interview, he said she'll be laying on the floor. They'll be calling 911. She will collapse. So now they got to pretend like she has the intellectual capacity to do 3 hours. They can't say she should have went on Joe Rogan, but we had to nix it because she couldn't do that. Because that would be admitting her limitations. And now it's not race and sex anymore. Now it's, well, I guess she's not exactly the brightest bulb in the room. Perhaps that could have something to do with it, Jim.
Yeah, well, I think it's true that Rogan gave a softball interview to Trump, and he did not challenge him when he could have challenged him and should have challenged him. But Rogan is not primarily a political person, you know, and he comes out of, he was a Democrat and a Bernie Democrat, I think at that, you know, and he comes out of it. But what's good about what's attractive about his show and what's good about his show, what people like and I like about his show is he gets people on and he talks to them for 3 hours and he lets them talk and he has discussion and they're bullshitting in a regular way. And the point about Trump is that Trump is capable of doing that. He's bullshitting half the time completely. And should, as a political person and as a candidate for president, he should be challenged on that more than Rogan did. But you have this, but Trump is self-confident is an understatement, but he's confident and relaxed in bullshitting with people, and he knows how to do it, and he gets away with it. Kamala is so wrought up in trying to figure out what she should say and what the correct line is, and that's why she's so bad. If she's not off script, if she's got a thing in front of her, a teleprompter and a thing, she's pretty good. But when she's off script, she's cackling and she's saying silly things that's because she doesn't really know what she wants, and she thinks there are things that she should say, but she's not quite sure what they are. And you see all that with someone. Trump is, people get the sense with Trump he's being what he is. You know, exactly. When you get this, and that's you like it or don't like it, but it's not something that he could bullshit his way through for 3 hours. Kamala, you get the sense, what am I trying to say here? And who should I be talking to? And what should I be? And that's just off-putting to people. You know, she's not sincere and she's not honest. And, you know, and that's a huge problem. And that would come out immensely. That's what would come out.
But they can't
talk about our interview with Rogan.
All they got to do now is say, she should have went on Rogan. That's it. You know what I mean? That's the critique. Trump went on Rogan and he got men as a result of that. And she should have went on Rogan because she would have got men on the result. And again, we get to this simplistic view of the world where going on Rogan or not going on Rogan get men, where we tend to say, well, wait, well, I recall that. You know, somebody should be there. If Garland Nixon's on the set and they're like, she didn't go or she didn't, I say, wait a minute. Let's get back to the details of that. Rogan invited her and she didn't go for this reason, that reason. Yeah. So they had the opportunity, but they chose not to go because they wanted to set these weird standards that Rogan just said. So the bottom line is the party. I didn't hear you guys out here screaming. Now you're on set talking about all the things that she did wrong. But then those same people that are so-called evaluating what she did right or wrong were saying that everything that she did was right. Yep. You know, when the MSNBCers and the Morning Joes, who now are Monday morning quarterbacking, well, she should have went on Rogan. At the time, Joe Rogan's just a jerk. He's a trucker.
At the time, we should be taking Rogan off the air. I mean, that's what they were saying. They got to deal with this. People know this. People know that this. They went through this. This is terrible. It was silly. You know, as you say, not only, you know, they try to keep people within the corral, the discursive corral, and they try to do that with soft power and media. You know, the fact that they have control of the mainstream media, but that they're losing anyway. So that's why they're now trying to censor things and trying to kick people like Rogan off the air, kick any kind of platform that's alternative off the air. Platforms that have, you know, Joe Rogan has 100 times the audience of MSNBC and CNN. And so he's enormously successful because people see that he's not trying to hide anything, and whatever he's saying, he's kind of sincere about it, and he's interested in hearing what the other person has to say. Whereas the mainstream media, they got a line, they must adhere to the line, the same talking points all the time, and they're not sincere, and they don't really have they're not treating their audience with respect.
Well, here's the other thing. There's a lot of things going on, but the other thing is this. I mean, when you look at the map, when I look at that electoral map, they got wiped out so bad, and Trump expanded so bad. You've got to look at everything they do. And I got to say this, the whole woke thing, right? I believe, I'll be honest with you, I do believe that in the Black community and in the Latino community, I'll just put it this way, it didn't help. One of the things that I've found over the course of time, I consider myself a professional political analyst. I go on TV and the interviews all over the world, and people say, who do you think will win? I say this reason or that reason, right? But one of the things that I've learned to do, Jim, remember back in the day when they used to say the way you buy stocks is right around. If you see Campbell soup all over buy that stock, you see Coca-Cola. You know what I mean? That was used to be the way before the internet and all of these algorithms, they'd say buy stock, the stuff that you can see that people are buying and selling, buy that stock, right? Everybody's got a new Ford. Boy, the new Ford Deuce and a Quarter. Remember that Electra 225? Everybody's buying those. Great, buy some Ford stock, right? And I've learned that in politics. Go around and talk to people. I talk to my guys, the guys that I retired with that are ex-cops. I talk to my cousin and some of the brothers up in Baltimore City. I want to hear what's happening with them. I talk to people in the working class white communities. I want to get a feel of people, right? When I got the feel and I talked to people, the reasons that they're getting, I didn't hear any of them.
Yep.
I heard from the brothers. What I heard was, for the most part, things are too high. I'm unhappy. But you know what else I heard? They aren't all thrilled with all the trans stuff. Let's be honest here. There are a lot of people from more traditional communities who, yes, we will certainly trans whatever should be reading to children. They ain't down with that at all. And I've always said this about myself. With me, it's easy. I believe that all human beings should have the same expectation of rights. That's it. I don't have to go into the races or the whatever. I can say all human beings should have the same expectation of rights. That covers everything. And then we can look into the various and sundry nuances of that. But okay. I just think that they push this kind of thing so hard, right? To the detriment of gay and trans people. You know what I mean? They use them as human shields. We got to bomb this country. Why? Because they are not nice to LGBTQ community and women. You're going to bomb the hell out of women and LGBTQ community in that country because you're just using it as an excuse to do what you want to do. And when it comes down to it, the whole woke thing is, I believe, it's trying to put a moral veneer on an immoral economic and an immoral military foreign policy. Their policies are foundationally immoral. And the whole we're standing up for women, minorities, blah, 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 is to say, I'm really the good guy. I'm doing it for a good reason, right? It is, what do they call that? Liberal interventionism. We got to go bomb your country and take your oil, but we're doing it for you, just for you. But I'm telling you, my anecdotal research has told me that cost them a lot of votes, not from people who have anything against gay people or trans or anything else. Anyway, your thoughts on that, Jim?
Well, yeah, there's a couple of things. Well, they've always been like feminist washing imperialism. In Afghanistan, they did that, and they gay wash Zionism because they have gay pride parades in Israel, and so those are all. Look, and the fight for gay rights, I entirely support, and it's been a wonderful to see the victories of that over the past 20 years. And the Democrats, Obama, and all of them opposed gay marriage until it was politically useful to them not to. So this is all you
The
know,
Defense of Marriage Act, wasn't that
yeah,
Bill
the
Clinton?
Defense of Marriage Act. They all supported it. Clinton was very proud of supporting it. Biden was very proud of supporting it. So, you know, they've been politically opportunistic about that. You know, the issue of trans now is you know, what people, again, I 100% believe that people are, adult people can be what they want. You know, nobody, Bruce Jenner, at the age of 65, whatever the hell old he was when he decided to become Caitlyn Jenner, good for him. You know, he's got the money. He's clearly, that's not a little peak that he must have felt strongly about that. That was something, you know, he doesn't have to do that. Ellen Page wants to become Elliot Page, good for her. But when you have 12, 13, 14-year-old kids who are going to be medically intervened, that's another story. And that's a real issue. And again, you can have discussions about that and disagreements about that. But when you treat people who are skeptical about that as if there's something wrong with them, or if they're bad people and they should be canceled, and you can't listen to them and you have to make them shut up. When you treat people who don't want biological males competing against women in sports, that's a real issue. And when you, as Renee Richards said, who was the first, I don't know, you know, Renee Richards was a doctor who was a well-known ophthalmologist and was in the Navy, and at the age of 40 or something was a transsexual, became a woman, and he competed then in women's tennis. I think it was the age of, but anyway, as an adult, he started to compete in women's tennis. Did he compete in women's tennis? But he's one of the transsexuals who said, you know, if I competed in women's tennis, I would have won everything. So these are real issues. And again, you can have a discussion about that. You can agree with it or disagree with it, but you have to be able to have a discussion about it. And the attitude cannot be people who are skeptical about that are evil. They're nasty. They can't be listened to. They have to shut them up. You have to get them off the stage. You have to fire them from their jobs. You have to cancel them, not let them speak in the academy. And there's no discussion to be had about that among sane, virtuous people. And it's, again, you're right. It's not an issue. That is an issue among gays and among lesbians. You know, a lot of the kids who are of, you know, ambivalent gender behaviors when they're 12, 13, 14 years old, our kids are going to end up being gay and lesbian. There's nothing wrong with that. But now they're intervening in those lives and having doctors who are making a lot of money off it. It's an industry coming in and saying, well, you might need gender affirm. Maybe you should take these drugs to prevent
anti-puberty drugs or something.
Puberty for a while. Maybe you should take these drugs. You know, this is something that gay and lesbian communities have problems with too. So that's a real issue. And again, there's a whole bunch of, that's a new thing. It's not sexual preference. It's another thing than that. And to pretend that it's not a problem, that it's not that's not an issue that has legitimate reasons to be very skeptical of, that and that anybody who is skeptical of it and who does dissent from this idea of everybody who, you know, every 12-year-old, 13-year-old who exhibits feminine characteristics should become a trans man, and every trans woman is just damaging to society. And it doesn't work. As you say, there are masses of people among, you say, Black community, Latino community, certainly that's true, but among everybody. Nobody really wants kids having medical and surgical interventions 12, 13, 14 years old. They don't really want that. And a lot of white people liberals who won't say it also are against it. And this is one of the things, but this is what we can't have anymore. We have a construction of this left as must encompass all of these checklist of things, one of which you must support quote unquote gender affirming care, which, if it means surgical and medical interventions in adolescence, is not just gender affirming, that's gender intervention in a certain way. And the left is not composed of all of that checklist of things. The left is composed first and foremost of, we want power for the working class. We want economic and political power for the working class. And that's historical leftism. And build on that. And you build on the solidarity you create based on material circumstance. We want to get together with you and help change your material and political power in this country. And if we disagree on other things, we'll have arguments about that.
Well,
Good faith arguments, and we'll decide about those other things. But that's the basis of left politics.
Let me add something. So I'm watching. I don't watch this crap. I see, bits and pieces online, and they got they've got Jonathan Capehart, who's you know who he is. He's a gay dude who's on. He works for the Washington Post, and he's on MSNBC, whatever, right? And I don't know if he's got a Washington Post, whatever. He's online. And here's what he's basically saying. Let me sum it up. As a result of the vote, I've realized what America is, and I don't like what I'm seeing, right? It was, yes, maybe we have to accept that the Republican Party wasn't a Trump's party, that this is Trump's America, and I don't like what I'm seeing. So now, that's why I keep going back to a cult. So now what you're saying is, if we look at the map, I'm in a very small minority. I'm in a minority, small or large, whatever. But I'm in a politically ideological minority. Most of the country has rejected with as they say in court, dismissed with extreme prejudice, my arguments of how a society should be, right? Instead of saying, we got to figure this out. Let's think. America has become something that rejects my ideology with extreme prejudice, and I don't like it. So now what they're saying is, I hate these voters. Well, these people didn't vote for me. I don't like them. Now, I heard them literally saying, Al Sharpton and somebody, we got to just stop talking about white people as racist and sexist. A lot of these black people and these Latinos, they voted for Trump too. Why, they're racist and sexist too. So now the Latinos and the black men who 25% of them voted for Trump, they're white supremacists.
Yep.
Now we got the white supremacist has spread it to the point where I didn't vote for it. I guess I didn't know. I don't feel good about it. But I just found out from Al Sharpton that I'm a white supremacist, Jim.
Yeah, again, look, I don't like what I see in America either. We are supporting a genocide, and most people aren't.
70% of Americans want it to stop.
They want it to stop, but they don't really do anything about it. People should be in the streets en masse. There are demonstrations and demonstrations.
There should be a nationwide strike. Everything should be.
I mean,
but the bottom line is,
look, there's a lot of things I don't, and most people are captured in capitalist ideology, and they're going to bounce. And they think, if Elon Musk is great a year ago, now he's not. So Mark Cuban, they'll bring Mark Cuban in, the Democrats in a few years, and he'll be the savior, he'll be the billionaire populist. This is there's a lot of things I don't like about America, but I don't hate the people for it. I understand. Even if they don't vote in the way you like them, Jim, even if they vote differently than you like. I grew up with attitudes. Not because I was stupid or because I was mean, but because those attitudes, that's the way you're educated. It took me some learning to change my mind about things, a lot of things. So I don't like what I see, but I don't have this attitude that, therefore I'm in a virtuous position and I can't stand living with these people. And, I got to go away from the country. I've been around the world. Look, you bounce back and forth between misanthropy. Most people are just jerks. And you can live that way for a long time. And a lot of it, a lot of times it seems like it's true. But this kind of political, virtuousness and self-importance and fatuousness and superciliousness and sanctimoniousness. I'm part of the elect. No, I'm someone who I feel like in my life, I'm someone who has had the chance to learn certain things and to be certain places and to have certain experiences that have helped turn me into a different person than I would have if I had not had those circumstances. And so that's the case for most people in the United States. So again, it's not a matter of romanticizing the electorate or the working class, but it's a matter of, first of all, who has the power? First of all, who is suffering because of the power imbalance? And the working class hasn't had look at the discrepancy between productivity and wages over the past 30 years. Look at people. The business about the inflation is a good example. Inflation is back to normal. It's 2 point something. Yeah, it's back to normal. But over the past 2 years, what happened to it? It's back to normal.
Exactly.
Now it's up here. And did wages follow that up there? No. So, it's kind of silly to be watching people who've lost 20% of over the past few years. Now you're only losing 2% a year, and say, well, did you get to give them that 20% in their wage increase from last 2 years? No, you're not. So again, these are the issues that we have to be talking about, that we have to build solidarity on. You build solidarity on the basis of shared action for changing your material circumstances and your power over those determining and creating those material circumstances.
That's
And
why
that's
let me throw this at you. There are times where there's realignments, and the people from Democratic Party go to the Republican. We've had times when people flop around, and there are times when the Whigs or the Know Nothing just dies. I see the collapse of a party, right? And seeing the so-called post-mortem by the people in the party, right? One of the things, if when people go to get into psychiatry, and a psychiatrist will talk to the person, they want to know what their inner voice is saying, right? And then a screwed up person has this really bad inner voice that's saying crazy shit. You know what I mean? They think it's voices, or their inner voice is saying everybody hates me, or whatever, right? They want to try to get to that inner voice that's talking to them to see how healthy they're. What are they saying to themselves? Oh, nobody likes me. Nobody ever is going to you know what I mean? And if you can get to that inner voice, you can kind of get to a lot of psychiatrists. If you can change the way a person talks to themselves and thinks about themselves, you can get them away from maybe some bad habits, right? I think I look at a party the same way. I listen to the inner voice. What is the inner voice? What is the inner conversation going on in the party? Is it salvageable? When I see a party get obliterated, the Supreme Court, the House, the Senate, the White House, the what do you call the whatchamacallit vote that Trump got the most votes?
Popular vote.
Everything that you can imagine. Every state except Washington State, the Republicans got more. They got obliterated. And now that you lost, I want to hear your inner voice. And when I hear an inner voice that says it's everybody's fault but ours, these people are evil, we couldn't have done anything substantively, anything different, nor should we have. You got to stop associating with the masses of people out here who agree with us. They're all a bunch of racist, sexist scum, right? I think we are at one of those interesting periods of time in history. It wouldn't be the first. People never thought the Whigs or the Know Nothings would go away. I don't see, maybe I'm wrong, any way that this party, where it is now, can recover. I mean, I'm not saying it will or it won't. When the Republicans got wiped out in 2006 and 2008, they really got their butts handed to them, right? If you remember, 2008, Obama came in. He had a filibuster-proof Senate, everything. You're right. When I
People
saw
said
that,
the same thing then. They said the same thing then about the Republicans.
You're right, but there was a different conversation going on in the Republicans. They just, played oh no, we're going to cut tax. They just stayed with the same bull crap they've been saying all along. They did not attack the voters. You know what I mean? They didn't do what I see the Democrats doing now is unparalleled. I have not seen a party. In our lives, we've seen parties get wiped out. Remember Reagan, what was it, 88? Well, how bad that was in the 80s when the Democrats were getting beat. We've seen these things happen over the course of time. But afterwards, if you listen to the internal conversation, I haven't heard one like this. Well, you got to add this. You didn't have the mainstream media, the CNN and the MSNBCs guiding the conversation for these brainwashed cult members like you do now. But your thoughts on this conversation they have doesn't mean that this brainwashed cult is in collapse. Your thoughts on that, Jim?
The difference is, I think, this notion of sanctimonious hypocrisy, and because people disagree with each other, and people said you're wrong, and go back and watch the old. A few months ago, I watched an old firing line with Bill Buckley and this the Democratic. Allard Lowenstein, I think it was, who was the Democratic senator who first challenged Johnson and they were having this debate. And clearly they were on different sides of the issue, but they were having a debate, and nobody was taking the attitude, you're kind of a despicable person. I can't talk to you. This is something, people were saying I'm right and you're wrong. And I'm going to take that and I'm going to continue to believe that I'm right and I'm going to argue with you furiously. But this attitude, again, that people have, that's been grown over the past 8 years, and it's since Trump, Trump, this is Trump derangement syndrome isn't just Trump derangement syndrome. It affects the people who have it as they now adopt, not only is Trump evil, but I'm good, and now we have a way of separating ourselves from not only people who are wrong and reactionary or too liberal or too conservative or too longer army, but now we have a way of separating ourselves from people who are good versus people who are bad. People have to be rejected. They're outside the bounds of normal society. I mean, and the difference between Trump and the Democrats is not that difference. It's not that kind of difference. But the Democrats have tried to turn it into that. And they have, for a lot of people, turned it into that. And that turns off voters. It's the sanctimonious hypocrisy that turns off voters. It's getting up and saying, you're a racist or a sexist if you don't vote for me. And you're part of this fascist. You're a fascist if you don't vote for me. And they may be fascist. They may be working towards fascism one way or another because they're doing X, Y, or Z, but they're not fascists because they didn't vote for the Democrats. They're not becoming fascists because they didn't vote for the Democrats. The Democrats are instituting fascism, So that's a matter of policies you should be able to discuss. But what I'm saying is, this turns off voters. You're wagging your finger at me. David Brooks had an excellent column. I hate to say, stupid reactionary. I don't like him at all, but his column was, voters to elites. Now can you see me? And one of the things he said, the Democrats, they say that for the working class, but they approach the working class like missionaries approaching the natives. I'm here to
save your soul,
to save your. It's what you call liberal imperialism, what they call humanitarian imperialism. It's really missionary imperialism. We're going to bring democracy to you poor, backward, third world people who don't know that you're living with dictators. And to the working class, they're saying we're going to bring virtue to you who don't know how racist, realize how racist and sexist you are. And we have to change all that for you. And whether you like it or not, we're going to do that. And really, if you don't come along with us, you're just proving our point. And that kind of attitude really turns people off. And the Republicans have policies that are nasty and bad, and I oppose them, but they don't go to the voters and say, you're lesser than me if you don't vote for me.
And I'll say this. I'll be honest with you, Jim, because I have friends that are all over the place ideologically. In the last few years, and I started seeing it during COVID, I have found, and I'm to the left of both parties as you are, but when it comes to talking about politics, talking about COVID, talking about censorship, talking about a lot of things, I can have a much more productive conversation with the MAGA people. I got areas of disagreement, certainly, but when it comes to First Amendment and granted, some of them, when it comes to Israel, they reveal who they are. Oh yeah, I'm for free speech, like the Florida guy, I'm for free speech until it comes to Israel. What I mean? It's Zionism, but not all of them. My point is this: I can have a better conversation about COVID and government intervention, and they're not going to call me an anti-vaxxer, or they're not going to call me a crazy conspiracy theorist or anything like that, or a purveyor of misinformation when I question the government. When you deal with these crazies now, the whole Democrat liberals, whatever you call these liberals, what I found is this: if you question power, you question government, you question concentrated power, they start name calling. They are like the guardians of this ruling elite conversation. And I'll say the MAGA people, there are a lot of things that I can have a conversation with them about that I couldn't even dream of having a conversation with the liberal class.
Well, yeah, I think that, look, they do it too. Sometimes, you're a libtard, you're a communist. I mean, Kamala Harris is a communist, and there's certainly that is there in right-wing community and the MAGA community, or whatever you want to call it, the conservative community. But I think you are much less likely to get the epithet that tells you I'm dismissing you and I will never have a conversation with you because you are the kind of person that I can't talk to. You'll have much less of that talking to conservatives. They'll argue with you on the issues. They'll try to have a decent conversation with you about the issues. And I think that's true. And I think, again, as you say, COVID was it was a disaster about this, and that's because they really thought the virtuousness of a vaccine and public health, and you're a killer and you're a plague carrier. And that's because of an ideology built over 30 years about vaccines as harmless magic bullets that people have, and you're anti-science and you're anti-rational, and if you have any skepticism about that. So that's part of that. And that really dug us in deeper, way, way deeper into this. Trump, COVID, the COVID vaccines, these things dug people into that pit of, the fortress of sanctimoniousness, where, pick the epithet. I see you coming. I have the epithet that names you as someone who's anathema and I can't really talk to. And that is not as frequent. You don't get that reaction as frequent with right-wing people they'll argue the case with you. They'll argue the merits of the case. They'll argue the politics of the case.
And here's the thing. What happened was this with COVID. Well, here's what I saw. There were people like us who said, I don't care what they tell us, we're questioning it. We have a right to question it, right? Yeah. These are government policies. We have a fundamental mistrust for the government, so we're going to question all policies. What I got from the so-called liberal class was the ruling elite have looked into this.
Yep.
And they've come up with a consensus on what should be done. And we have to all support that consensus because they are our betters and they know what's best for us and they're looking out for us, and we've got to listen to them. And if you don't want to go along with it, people are going to die because you're questioning it. You're going to die. Everybody's going to die because you're questioning it, right? And so that's when I started to realize there's a fundamental line between my type of thinking, our kind of thinking, and that person's thinking. And the line is, on one side you have people that say I have a fundamental mistrust, and might I add, traditionally in the left, that was part of it, a mistrust for power. Well, the corporations and the government, all that, right? A fundamental distrust of power, so that when power says do this, you say I got to question that. You got to convince me, as opposed to another group who said, not only do we now have a mistrust for power, our job is to enforce the dictates of the ruling elite and of the government. And you are an enemy of the ruling elite and the government. And my job is to stop you. And I think that's when a lot of people, and they started getting mad at the Jimmy Dores and the people who said, well, I'll have a conservative on my show and ask him some questions and talk to him. Shh. You can't ask that man questions. People might hear what he has to say. And he's a conservative or a libertarian or a communist or anything like that.
Yeah. No, listen.
Last word, Jim. We're getting ready to run, but go ahead.
That's I gotta go too. But that's the epistemological crisis. This is not science. This is anti-science. This is trust the experts. This is trust the elite, trust the experts. That's anti-science. Science is question everything. Look at the questions that are brought up. We have to be able to question what the experts say. Every advance of science has been made against the advice of the experts, the greatest advances. And this is about thinking and having a society in which you can advance your political thought, your technological thought, your scientific thought. That's by being predisposed to be skeptical and questioning of things. And what they did during COVID was they tried to shut that down entirely. We have the clergy, which is the elite, the CDC and the NIH. We have the saints, number one, Fauci. And if you question that, then anathema. This is a quasi-religious attitude, and it's the opposite and enemy of scientific discussion and scientific thought and scientific practice and scientific thinking. And that's what they're in, and they're still in. And that's very, very difficult. And we have to keep fighting it and trying to overcome it.
And as quiet as it kept, there are so many factors. I think COVID was one of the factors that caused them to get the crap beat out of them too.
The only person who said that, the only person I saw on TV said that was Chris Christie, and he talked about Florida. And he said, "You want to know something about Florida?" He said, "Look at the vote for Rick Scott, 2016. Rick Scott won by 0.5 point. 2020, he won by 1 point. 2024, he wins by X number of points. That's because a lot of people moved to Florida because of COVID. And he was the only one who said that, who said they moved to Florida to get rid of the COVID, get away from the COVID restrictions. And now they're voting. Don't just look at the vote for Trump, look at the vote for Rick Scott. So that's a true thing. I think I'm certainly someone who, was turned off hugely by what the Democrats did and their people in COVID. That was delusional. It was wrong. It was a pack of lies. The Democrats fell for it in the way that the Republicans did it. And I can show you the percentage of people who thought, what's the infection fatality rate for COVID? The Democrats thought it was like 25%.
Yes,
it was all nonsense. They believed lies. They were delusional, and they still cling to that.
Yeah, I tell you, I know personally people. I know one person right off the bat, a friend who was a diehard Democrat, and it was the vaccine mandates, where this particular person were like, I don't like this, who said, I never thought I'd say this, but I'm sure glad we had a Republican governor. And they don't like either of the parties either, but they used to be a Democrat. And that's when I saw them going sour. And I think one of the things that isn't taken into account is there were a lot of people who, when that happened, went sour. If you go back to COVID, one of the groups that were the most likely to refuse the jab, Black males.
Yeah. Oh, there was
Black
that great.
And you know what they would say? They always say, well, the Tuskegee, whatever think about the jab, the Tuskegee experiment. They get me again, right? It's logical for a person to look at that historical context and say, I'm scared to do it, right? Now, it is possible that is a factor, because these are people who they couldn't get jobs, they couldn't do certain things. They were, you know what I mean? Some
That's
of them
right. They got fired from their jobs. 70,000 healthcare workers in New York. How many of those think were black workers in New York, healthcare workers? There was the great confrontation with Fauci going around came across a black guy who said, I'm not taking that. I said, why not? Because you don't really know what's going on with that thing. And Fauci's running away. And the black guy was right. He was absolutely right. And this is, and the black people were the ones whose kids were threatened to be kicked out of school. Yes. Black people were the most skeptical of it. And what happened with Tuskegee Institute, what happened in World War II, that's why there are absolutely clear, unequivocal international conventions on biological freedom, saying everybody is the right to refuse any medical treatment, period. And there should be no mandatory vaccination. That's why my favorite people in the world, I urge everybody to look her up, Christine Stable-Ben, a Danish vaccinologist whose work is vaccines. And she says, I oppose vaccine mandates. That's against the biological convention. People have to have the right to refuse to take medicines. Once you have the government being able to force people to take medicines, they're never going to stop, especially when it's a farmer captured government, which it is. I mean, so this is a whole thing. But what I'm saying is people were really pissed off about that. They lost their jobs. Social workers in New York lost their jobs. Teachers lost their jobs. I know people, they lost their jobs. And nobody's this is crazy. And you're supposed to be a friend of the working class, and you're going to kick them out of their job because they won't take an experimental vaccine. How
about this? Did you see the kind of gains that Trump made in California, in Manhattan, in the blue? Now, might I add, these are the places that were when it came to the COVID measures, that had the most onerous measures, had the most strict mandates, right? Was New York City, California, et cetera, right? And these are the places where Trump made the most hay, right? They don't talk about that, but I really believe, I don't think there was a lot of people who just sat there and said, I'm going to vote for Trump because of COVID. But I think that there may have been some, but because he was with the whole vaccine, you could. But my point is, here's my point.
He developed a vaccine.
Yeah,
look, I'll say again. I wrote a long 15,000 word article, "A Danger to Society Against Vaccine Mandates."
But my point is this: I think that soured a lot of people. Yes. I know some who had been diehard Democrats their whole life that during that time period said, I don't want to do it. And when they had to face the consequences, that turned them off. In other words, they lost some people that they're never, ever going to get back.
That's right. And
That
they,
just
they
said,
won't,
I
they
don't
won't
like what you
necessarily, as you say, they won't necessarily say that now, but it had an effect. You made me do something to my body that I didn't want to do. And that really a lot of people got sick about and still are getting sick from, and it really is these are terrible shots. And I was going to say, again, I'll repeat it if people haven't heard it from me. I wrote a long article called Dangerous Society in 2023 in April, I think, or August, against vaccine mandates when they were just starting. And it was well researched. I'll stand by every word I said of it today. You'll learn more from reading that than you ever learned from Fauci. I went to the same high school as Dr. Fauci, so a lot of my classmates were the most. You think everybody was? So you think Fauci was a saint? He was literally a saint to these people. And I had people, all my classmates, almost to one were, oh, what a fool! You're an idiot. Do your own research. What a fool! One doctor at a Catholic hospital said, I only hope to see Jim die in agony. I wish I could see him die in agony from COVID. That's the kind of response I got from a doctor. That's a science. That was on the basis of his scientific thinking. So, this was craziness, and it is craziness. And people haven't got over
a lot of people. They lost. It's only, what's interesting? They did polls on all of this stuff. They didn't do a poll on that.
Nope.
I would like to see a poll on how many people are Democrats that left during COVID. How many people were lost their zeal for the party during COVID? All people. First of all, 40% of all Black businesses closed. 40%. You think those people are happy about the lockdowns and all that? You think those people are, yay, I can't vote for Sister Kamala. You know what I mean? It was crap. People got hurt economically. People, all these terrible things happened. And I think that there was a number of things, but I believe that the echoes, shall we say, of the COVID, and I said it last, but this is it, the echoes of COVID, the echoes of warmongering, the echoes of East Palestine, Ohio. Train turns over. They don't show up. You lost Ohio and Pennsylvania. It was on the Pennsylvania-Ohio line. You lost those. That's when they were started going away. You know what I mean? Florida was one of the first places to go. North Carolina, what happened there recently with the hurricanes? Yeah. These people can see that you got money for everybody but them. And so between COVID, between sending all this money to Zelensky and these clowns and Israel, and people are suffering here at home, it's not hard to see. But yet the only thing these people say, Jim, is both of us now, sadly, we're both white supremacists.
Some of my best friends are white people.
All right, Jim. Well, look, let's end up like this. How can people find you online?
Jim Kavanaugh's Substack. It's below my name there, and on Twitter at the polemicist _. Please subscribe to my Substack. That's the way to get everything.
All right, and don't forget, everybody, since we are on YouTube, Jim and I, man, let me tell you something. The boosters are great. I get one every day. Probably when I get off, I'm going to get a couple boosters, Jim, because we're on YouTube. They are effective and safe and wonderful for you. So make sure you get 2 or 3 boosters a day. One is never going to get it. In fact, sometimes I like to, when I go to bed, I just hook an IV up to my wrist and just let the boosters just flow all night. Kind of gives me a philosophical vision of the universe. It's great.
I can't tell you how great they are.
Yeah, there we go. They're so great you can't even put it into words. All right, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, everybody. Don't forget, share this on all your social media platforms. Follow me on YouTube. Follow me on Rockfin. Follow me on Rumble. Trump and the crew say that they're going to turn off this censorship stuff. We shall see. We shall see. So, but follow me everywhere. And of course, if you can afford it, you got all of these things: Patreon, PayPal, buy me a coffee. Some of us used to work at Radio Sputnik, but we don't anymore. So if you can afford to donate to the channel, that's a help. Jim Kavanaugh, thanks a lot. And we'll talk again soon. Thanks a lot, everybody. As I said, everybody out there, like, share, subscribe. We've got, what do we got right now? 568 people. 568 people should be sharing this on YouTube and on your X account, because I can't do it. So I got to count on you. Thanks. We're out.
Okay.